So how did you get your DNA would be the next question, right? So finally we know about DNA, how did you get it? So for this week, our objectives are vocabulary. The vocabulary is on Quizlet. Don't forget the objectives right here. So you're going to be able to draw the process of meiosis and show chromosome differences as we go down. You're going to explain how traits are passed from parents to offspring. You're going to model and provide evidence of genetic variation due to crossing over, and explain when during meiosis mutations can occur. Okay, so first, genes, traits, and you. So we have to remember that our characteristics are our traits. So when someone says traits, they're talking about what you look like. Okay, so what they're seeing when they look at you is your structural proteins, which is a certain type of protein. We'll get into that next week when we talk about proteins. And keep in mind that the instructions for making these proteins are in your DNA. So all cells have DNA. How did it get there? You can read the comic. It's funny. But you got your DNA from your parents, which came from their parents, which came from their parents. So the DNA that's in you is a copy of your mom, or a part of your mom and dad's DNA. So what happens is that sperm and egg both have half the number of chromosomes, so they're both haploid cells, and they're going to combine to form a zygote. You have to have half the number of chromosomes in the sperm, half the number of chromosomes in the egg, so that when they combine, you get a full number, right? In humans, it's 23 chromosomes in sperm, 23 chromosomes in egg, and then when they combine, we get the full number of 46 chromosomes that are in our body cells, okay? So both sperm and egg are haploid cells. Sometimes it's shown as just an N. That's what it means. It has half the number. So these cells then go through the cell cycle repeatedly until it becomes a fetus and eventually a child. So therefore, every chromosome you got from your mom, right, all the chromosomes over here, have a matching chromosome that they got from their dad, which ends up making a homologous pair. Right, we'll talk about those in the next slide. And then together, all those chromosomes, when they come together, make a diploid cell, which has the full number of chromosomes. And it's no longer called N, it's now called 2N, because it's got the full number. So we just talked about homologous chromosomes, and we talked about this a little bit last week. Homologous chromosomes are the same size, same shape, they code for the same genes, but they can carry different information, right? So you could have the gene for eye color, like on this example over here, right? This gene could be for eye color, but the one on your mom's chromosome could say blue, and the one on your dad's chromosome could say green, right? But they're both the gene for eye color. Okay, up here we have all of our chromosomes shown up on this top, and they're all laid out by size and shape. Okay, they're all homologous, so you have one chromosome from mom and one from dad, and they pair up like that. Those are all of your homologous pairs, and that's a karyotype. You learned about that last year. So one from each parent, and cells with homologous chromosomes, like we said earlier, are diploid cells, meaning they're 2N, so they have the full chromosome number. So then how do we make sex cells, right? If all of our body cells are 2N, how do we get cells that are only N? How do we get cells that have 23 chromosomes in them? And cells are formed during meiosis, which sounds a lot like mitosis, but it isn't. So here's mitosis. Let's remember. In mitosis, we go through, it's in cytokinesis right now, so, or at least mine is, but we go through all of the stages, right? We have prophase, and then the chromosomes kind of form. We have metaphase, they line up in the middle. Anaphase, they pull apart. Telophase, 2 new cells, right? So prophase, it's a mess. Metaphase, middle. Anaphase, apart. Telophase, 2 cells. That's mitosis stages. Our stages are going to be pretty similar, so I wanted you to kind of quickly look at this to review it. So our major differences between mitosis and meiosis, right, is that mitosis forms body cells or somatic cells. Meiosis forms sex cells or gametes. Mitosis, you get a full set of chromosomes, so 46 or a diploid number if it's a different number to begin with, if it's a different animal, right? And meiosis, you end up with half the number, right? We're going to cut that number in half, so you no longer have homologous pairs. You'll have a haploid number, 23 chromosomes, right, or N. And then mitosis, you end with 2 cells. Meiosis, you end with 4 cells, because we're going to go through that division once and then twice. And then in mitosis, all of the cells are identical in the end. Meiosis, the cells end and they're going to have variation. Each cell is going to be slightly different from the next. So here is our mitosis versus meiosis, so you can see what happens, right? So mitosis, 1 cell, it's split into 2. Both cells are identical because our 46 chromosomes replicated and then pulled apart. Whereas in meiosis, what happened is our 1 cell DNA replicated, like we talked about last week, right? So we formed all our X's, and then they line up a little differently. So during metaphase, all of the X's line up in the middle during that first division, and the homologous pairs line up together. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. So during this first division here, we actually split up the homologous pairs, right? So all of those X's all line up together. We split the homologous pairs. And then during that second division, now that the homologous pairs are split, we split the sister chromatids. Okay, so there's still X's here, and then kind of lining up in the middle like this. You'll see it in the next slide. And then those split during our first division. And then our second division, down here, all of these guys, all the chromosomes are still kind of like this, right? And they line up. And those X's all split, just like mitosis. So that second division looks a lot like mitosis, where the first division, it looks a little funny. All right, so when this happens, it causes a lot of variation, and that variation comes from the different way that it divides, okay? So there's 2 different places where the variation occurs. It occurs during crossing over, and it occurs during independent assortment. So crossing over first, and these are the X's that I was talking about right here, okay? So what happens is our homologous pairs end up lining up together during metaphase 1. All right, so they're going to line up together all in a line in the middle, right? And then during anaphase, 1 pulls apart one way and 1 pulls apart the other way. And that's how you divide your homologous pairs. But something funny happens when this happens. What occurs is that during metaphase 1, the chromosomes actually can transfer genetic information to each other, right? So what they do is they kind of cross their legs over. See them up here in this picture? Right? And when they do that, they actually give each other genetic information. And when that happens now, this sister chromatid is different from this one, and that's different from this one, and different from this one. So they all kind of become their own, they all have their own genetic information in it now, right? Because they transferred information. That causes a lot of variation, and that causes a lot of variation when they're passed down. So each sex cell ends up different from the next. Right. The other place that it happens is when the chromosomes separate randomly, and that's during independent assortment, right? So, oh, here's my little tetrad that's split. So this right here, up here, is going to be metaphase 1. This is during the first division of meiosis. So these were, I want to erase that little line. Give me a second. Let me erase that line. So what this was an X that went like this, that was next, and this is next, like that, okay? These guys could exchange information when they crossed, right? And then this one's being pulled this way, and this one is going to get pulled that way, right? So we're splitting those homologous pairs. But when we do that, let's say green is the mom and the blue is the dad's chromosomes, right? So some of your chromosomes go one way and others go the other way, right? So when I have a kid, if my chromosomes separated, they're not going to get all of my maternal chromosome is the one I got from my mom, right? And they're not going to get all the ones I got from my dad. They get a little bit of all of them, right? That's why you might look like some of your relatives, like some of your mom's family or some of your dad's family, but not all just one. Make sense? Right? So this is the first time, and these separate at random, so we don't know which one's going up which way. And then during the second division, which is going to be down here, right? Down here, these X's then separate and we get chromatids that go into each side, right? And then see how in the end we have some green, some blue, different ones in the other cell. So all 4 cells in the end look totally different than each other. It adds a lot of assortment. So once you go through meiosis, you then end up with your sperm or your egg. Okay? The sperm and the egg are then used as sex cells. So the male and female gametes are sperm and egg. That's what you just made during meiosis. And those gametes can then combine, because we have 23 on this side and 23 on this side, right? Both haploid. They can combine to make a diploid cell, which can turn into a new organism. And the random variation causes most sperm and egg to be different. That's why siblings don't always look the same, right? Because what are the chances that everything's going to split the same way? We'll see some videos that have the whole process of meiosis going on. You're not responsible for the different stages. I won't make you know those, right? But I want you to get the gist of what's going on and what's happening with the chromosome number and then where that variation happens. Write any questions down, make sure you wrote the notes down, and then I'll see you on Monday and you guys can ask the questions that you have.